1st of April, and so April Fool's joke. We're live for you at the Gallagher Estate in Midrand for the DA's Federal Congress. New leadership will be chosen. A number of items will also be ironed out. As Ndogozo mentioned, some 2,000 delegates are already gathered here, and I can tell you that it is a hive of activity. What you're not able to hear are the banging sounds of music to hype the crowds that will be gathered here, or the delegates that will be gathered here. So this is the first time that delegates are meeting since the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. The last Congress that was held by the Democratic Alliance was virtual, and I can tell you for sure the atmosphere on the plenary floor is quite electric. The DA's Federal Congress is said to be the supreme policy-making and governing body of the party. In terms of the program, here's what you can look forward to today. We're going to be hearing speeches by some candidates. We're also going to be hearing a number of issues that will be ironed out, as we mentioned, in terms of constitutional amendments. We are joined in studio by Professor Dirk Kotze, and on the floor we've got our reporters Atim Tongana as well as Aaron Bates. We'll touch base with them a little bit later on, but first let's get into the politics of it with Professor Kotze. Prof, thank you very much for your time this morning. I think it's very easy to get lost in the politics of the DA in terms of them being an official opposition and always heckling the ANC, if you will, or pointing out the errors of the ANC. But how would you characterize the politics of the Democratic Alliance?
Well, I think they try to present themselves as an alternative for the ANC in many respects, in terms of policies, in terms of political philosophy. They are much more sort of in the past they've been a liberal party. They've made some significant changes in that respect, in terms of the economy, in terms of looking at society in general. They are a type of what they call a federal party. So they look at South Africa, or want to see South Africa, as not a centralized state, but much more of a decentralized state. So provinces, for that reason, must play a much more important role. And they replicate it also in the structure of the DA at this stage. So the provinces are, in essence, the focus areas of the party. What we see here today is the center, but that is not necessarily the main activity of the party also. I think what the party is going through a transition in its own right, because it is obviously looking at next year's election and see itself as a major contender for position in a coalition government at national and provincial level. But at the same time, it is also playing the role of the official opposition, especially in Parliament. And what we are seeing now more and more is that they take the initiative in Parliament also in the form of legislation that they try to table there. For example, now about coalitions and how to structure or formalize coalitions more than up to now. And then in some cases they play both the role of opposition and government. For example, in the Western Province, they are the governing party on its own, not in a coalition. But in many local authorities, metropolitan councils, they are part of, or the leading party in those metropolitan councils, which means that there's actually almost three identities: that of governing party, that of opposition, and then that of a leading party in a coalition government.
You mentioned the importance of provinces. I mean, the Democratic Alliance has not had an opportunity to be in government, so those policies remain to be tested. In the Western Cape, they're doing quite well, but the accusation has been that they concentrate on just their constituency. It's always said, right, you fly into Cape Town, the first thing you see is what? It's the poor quality of living of the people from Langa, Nyanga, etc.
Yes. Now that is definitely the case, and I think this is where what the ANC's argument and other opposition parties' argument is. However, they don't make inroads into the DA's constituency up to now. The ANC, unfortunately for them, is also in decline in the Western Cape. And I think this is part of the unique politics of the Western Cape, which is very different from the rest of the country. It is the province with the most parties contending in elections. It's a province where there's very regional differences. The West Coast, for example, versus the Southern Cape versus the Karoo, a very different sort of political cultures. And I think this is one of the reasons why it is so difficult for any party really to develop a dominance in that province. But I think that the DA is now in a position where they have to become also relatively long in power, and that's the danger for any political party, that they are for too long in power and become complacent, and they don't focus anymore as they are supposed to focus. So some people are even talking about the possibility of a coalition government in the Western Cape. We will have to see that. They've lost in the last election. 2019, they did lose some votes in the Western Cape. So that will become an interesting vote in itself.
And